Yeah, actually, the fight is happening as we talk in the Strait of Hormuz. At least in the last few hours, we had three tankers, oil tankers,
Four,
being hit.
Dima,
Yes,
four. The
four.
rest
Yeah, yeah,
four.
yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah, I forgot the last one, and we have four of them being hit by IRGC because they're trying to. The United States is trying to use the southern part of the strait, close to Oman. The Omani government. I really feel. They don't know what to do because there's tremendous
Exactly.
pressure from the United
Let,
States.
let me let me let me ask you: do you think the Omanis are playing a double game, Nima?
They know that at the end of the day, what is important is their neighbor, which would be Iran.
Mm.
But their economy could go under tremendous pressure if they get along with Iran. I would say the behind the scene, they said to Iranians, "We're with you," but
Yes,
we cannot say that,
we cannot say that out
officially.
loud.
Yeah, and you do whatever you want to do, but we're gonna say, we're gonna say to the United States, you can use whatever you want close to our border, but after all, I would say, because they cannot go against the United States. you know they know the pressure, they know the power of the United States if they try to put pressure on them, and their economy. This is the problem with the Omani government, and they're not that much powerful.
Yes.
We have to accept that.
Mm.
And this comes again, the new confrontation between uh, the two sides, Iran and the United States, fighting each other in the Strait of Hormuz. They try to intercept some of these Iranian drones in the Strait of Hormuz. It was
Mm.
reported. The United States, they're
Mm.
trying to use the Navy to protect these tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. That
Mm.
is, but Iran is not going to back down.
No,
We know that.
forget it.
They're not going. These guys they're so tough, in my opinion, and they're going to learn it as time goes by, and they're not going to back down. That's why I think the war would continue this way. I don't know
Mhm.
if the United States is going to attack Iran in the coming hours because of the attacks on these tankers, because that could be the case. Iran is prepared for that, by the way. From
Mm.
what I've heard from Iranians, they're prepared for the attack if something happens, and they know what would be the targets of retaliations on the part of Iran. This is the situation in this Strait of Hormuz. You've mentioned correctly the case of Lebanon. Nothing
Mm.
is happening there
No.
in the southern part of Lebanon. The fight is going on. They somehow brought down the level of casualties, the level of people being killed because of something. It's not it's some sort of pause. It's not pause. It's the fight. It's unbelievable. I don't know how there is no word for that to explain that. What is that? It's, as Ambassador Chas Freeman says, that it's a ceasefire with Israeli characteristics.
Excellent definition. Yeah, very good. Very good. Mm.
This is the reality. The two sides, the fight is going on. There is no MOU, in my opinion.
Because the
They're
MOU
trying
is
to do
already broke.
something, but not that much.
When it comes to Lebanon, the MOU is already completely broken. And this is what Arakshi was saying.
Yeah.
And they still don't listen on the other side.
That's why they're not going to have another meeting with Americans. That's the reason, that because if Lebanon is not resolved and the fight is happening in if the Strait of Hormuz, because in the MOU in paragraph 5 it specifically says under Iranian, they say management or somehow, yeah, it says that, but you don't see that happening. The United States is still there trying to manipulate the strait, and the war is going on. This is the problem. Pepe, the other part is NATO and what's going on in NATO in the war in Ukraine, which is, I would say, one of the main issues right now for NATO. What do they want to do? On the part of Europeans, they have 90 billion euros. They have prepared that for Ukraine. So far, they sent 4 billion euros to Ukraine, and they're talking about the rest is ready to be sent to Ukraine. And right now at the NATO summit, they're talking about something like 70 billion in support of Ukraine and what Ukraine is doing against Russia. Donald Trump today said that he talked with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. Both of them want to put an end to the war and everything. Let's see what he's just. He's just repeating the same sort of rhetorics that we've heard so far in more than a year from Donald Trump. How do you see that front?
Very complicated, because this summit is basically the re-weaponizing of Ukraine summit, especially with the ultra-billionaire drone program. So this is basically NATO betting on a drone war against Russia to undermine Russia and going all out. The Russians know it. Even before the summit, they already knew that this was the only card left, because NATO doesn't have any serious military card to play. So these drone wars are essentially terrorist wars, because they go against a lot of Russian civilian infrastructure. So what are the Russians doing? You should look at what's happening on the battlefield. And it's very, very important that finally we are getting a Russian response to the drone war in terms of devastating counterattacks against the industrial military complex in Kiev and around Kiev, especially these past 2-3 days. And this is going to increase. And this is responding to, I would say, practically a national consensus in Russia that this is it. This has gone for too long. It's time to end it, and end it our way, and end it on the battlefield. Because we know, once again, Lavrov, the United States is non-agreement capable. What's the point of discussing with Tweedledum and Tweedledee, Witkoff and Kushner in zillion trips to Moscow? Nothing. Nothing's going to happen. So we have to win this on the battlefield. Extra element, what Trump said, what Putin said on the record yesterday for the first time. He talked about not only the liberation of Donbass, which is ongoing, but Novorossiya. This is a game changer. This means the whole area that is Russian land, and that goes all the way to Odessa. So this is basically the whole of southeast Ukraine, almost a center and center southeast Ukraine, almost practically everything. And Russia is framing it in terms of, we are augmenting our buffer zone. Of course, because if they conquer all that, it's going to be close. On the other side will be NATO. So buffer zone, even if they don't conquer everything, but there's going to be a sort of demilitarized zone between what is conquered and what's going to be close to NATO on Western Ukraine. So the new configuration of the SMO is already in effect. It's happening in front of our eyes now. This is something that, for instance, last month in Russia during the St. Petersburg Forum, there was a lot of discussion about, look, things need to change. And at the time, there was a huge discussion at the top, the National Security Council, with some people, most of them are pretty hardcore hardliners, in fact, like Bortnikov from the FSB, these people. And apparently Putin was listening to them. And Putin obviously was listening to public opinion. And don't forget, there are elections in Russia in September. So the continuation of the war, the old style, is not going to win anybody's hearts. Forget it. And because of these are the counter effects of the unintended consequences of Ukraine ramping up this drone terrorist war against all sorts of targets, some of them energy, but many of them civilian infrastructure. The Russian response is making them pay much more than they could ever imagine. Because the assumption was, okay, we can strike anyone in Russia, they're not going to do anything because they announced their red lines and they never fulfilled them. Not anymore. This ship has sailed. Now it's a completely different story. And something that it has been very enlightening for all of us to compare the war in Ukraine, the proxy war in Ukraine, NATO against, with the American war against Iran, what Russia learned from what Iran did. They learned a lot. And they are going to implement some of it. Not in terms of a decentralized mosaic, because in Russia, the decisions are very much centralized. It's everything is the Minister of Defense, and that you have to follow the line of the Minister of Defense in Moscow. That's it. But they learn to be more supple, to be more creative, more dynamic, and to confound the enemy. Don't forget that many of the Russian, of the Ukrainian generals, they study in Russia, they know how the Russians think. So they need to improvise. They need to be more creative and of course, unleash their firepower, which so far they have unleashed what? Maybe 30%, 40% of what they have. The same thing with Iran. Iran in that war, they unleashed what? Maximum 40% of what they have. So these parallels between the wars are fascinating to follow, in fact. And considering the fact that there is a strategic partnership and they discuss military matters at the highest level, they are obviously passing information back and forth on both fronts. What Iran learned from Russia and what can Russia learn from Iran? So obviously, do they study that in NATO? Of course not. If you read the NATO internal papers, it's always the same shit. They actually believe that they have a chance to undermine Russia with this new drone war, with this multi-billion drone program. So this is what's happening in Ankara, essentially. Lots of money for lots of drones, so Ukraine is going to lose the war a little longer instead of losing in the next few weeks or months. But a very important, it's not a sub-theme. In fact, it's related to the main theme. What is the role of the US in all that? Basically, the US is, at the same time, forcing everybody to spend 5% of their GDP on defense, and at the same time, the US is in the back seat in terms of Ukraine, and this is a European war on Ukraine. The US has nothing to do with that. Okay, we can supply with some intel satellites that you don't have, etc., that we have it all over Europe, etc., but that's it. The actual hardcore war, you have to conduct it. So the Europeans, they look at what they have. What do we have? Nothing. Okay, let's make a lot of drones. This is okay. I think this is the ultra minimalistic explanation to what's going on during this NATO summit. And of course, it's not going to work because the counter Russian response has already started. Okay, we're going to go all out on the battlefield. And we're going to destroy your industrial military complex. Already happening.
Pepe, do you think that the leadership in Russia and Iran, do they fully recognize that these two wars are the same?
Yes. Of course, you won't hear that in public. But fine geopoliticians on both sides, and we have a lot of them, in Tehran and in Moscow. They know that this is the same war because this is essentially what? The multiplied American war against civilization states that do not abide by the American rules, the so-called, the former rules-based international order. Russia and Iran on the front lines, and China, which the ultimate war is going to be the US against China. 3 civilization states, 3 sovereign independent nations, 2 of them nuclear powers, with an enormous scope across Eurasia. the three of them together, they can expel the US from Eurasia for good. This is a process that has already started. We are in the middle of this process. These three civilization states expelling the United States from Eurasia. So this is turning Mackinder, Mayhem, Spikeman, Brzezinski, all of them upside down at the same time. It's absolutely astonishing what's going on. And now, much, much faster than before. With the war that Iran just won, this accelerated the process. The process was, let's say, was slowly but surely. After the Iranian victory, now it's very, very fast. And if we have this new security umbrella in West Asia, which would be essentially provided by Pakistan, the Saudis, of course, they obviously agree because they have already a military pact which has been upgraded. The Pakistanis have explained to the Iranians, look, this is how it's going to work. Do you agree with that? Well, as long as it doesn't threaten us, Iran, no problem. And of course, the other GCC nations will have to submit, right? And Egypt could be part of it, depending how they're going to placate the American owners of Egypt. And Turkey, of course, when they look at that, they said, look, we are hedging too much. You know, our future is not with NATO. Our future is with Eurasia as a whole. So this is all the velocity escape of this process, which until 3-4 months ago was very slow. Now it's very, very fast. It's changed completely. It's a completely new ball game. And this is something that Trump administration cannot understand because they have less than zero geopolitical thinkers. The only kind of geopolitical thinking that they have inside the administration is somebody like Kobe, the guy who actually redacted the national security doctrine, which is basically a xenophobe. For him, there's only one war that matters, and it's the war of the US against China. He doesn't even understand Eurasia as a whole. He only sees China as the threat to the US. And on NATO, Nima, look at the head of NATO nowadays. He doesn't even qualify as a cartoon character. This guy's leading NATO.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. So how can they possibly see the big picture in front of them? Even if of course they didn't, even if they had studied Mackinder, Mahan, Spikeman in school, or they were contemporaries of Brzezinski. They read Brzezinski's book, The Grand Chessboard, 1997. They still haven't learned about it. And they still haven't learned that when later Brzezinski was saying, maybe it's a bad idea. Maybe we'll try to incorporate Russia into the West. So, you know, when you compare the educational and geopolitical level of people in power in Iran and Russia with the West, it explains everything. They simply cannot see that the chessboard is a different chessboard. The chessboard that they grew up with doesn't exist anymore. They still think that the chessboard in the 90s is the chessboard. This was a long time ago. And that's why what we are seeing today in the streets of Tehran, in Qom, Najaf, Karbala, Mashhad, these millions of people, they are not only celebrating the wisdom of leader Khamenei, the continuation with Moshtaba, but the fact that Iran perfectly understands that the new chessboard is something that Iran is creating now. The chessboard changed because Iran won a war. And that's why everything changed. They cannot possibly understand that in the West, Nima. It's endemically impossible. You know, it's too much. It's too much for them. They will have to revive all their concepts. They will have to adopt diplomacy. Impossible.
Pepe, there are two important players in BRICS. One of them is China, as you mentioned. China's benefit is peace, in my opinion, because when you have peace, you have more partners, you have more trade, and you have everything. And that's why they don't want any war to continue.
Sure.
And on the other hand, you see India is somehow siding with Israel and the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is the agenda on their part, but it doesn't seem that it would bring good days for India as time goes by.
It always comes back to the same place, Nima. The inferiority complex of the Indian ruling classes and the fact that they still have their century of humiliation under the Raj, they could not get rid of it, unlike China. China, they managed to get over the century of humiliation and, okay, that's it. We're going to grow according to our standards, to our system, and we don't owe anything to anybody. The Indian ruling classes, that's not how it works. And this is an enormous problem for BRICS. So I don't expect anything solid coming from this BRICS summit in September. We are only 3 months away. It's not much. I was talking to an Indian friend, very well. It's one of the brightest Indian brains, in fact. And he was saying, no, the leadership here, they made the wrong bet and they cannot backtrack. So there's nothing they can offer to BRICS. And other BRICS nations already know that. So how you're going to compose during the summit? It's going to be very difficult. Very difficult. Brazil will be distracted by the elections. India doesn't know what to do. It's going to be very interesting how Iran is going to be received in India as a full BRICS member. This is very, very important. And of course, Russia and China will have to do the leg work and the hard work all over again to put the whole thing back together. And extra problem, the Emirates. The Emirates are a full BRICS member. Who's going to bridge the gap between the Emirates and Iran inside BRICS? Only 2 candidates, Russia and China again. So this summit is going to be, wow, it's going to be hell, really. If the Indians were clever enough, they would try to pull it off by, okay, let's finally have a common platform. But it's impossible. When you consider how they reacted even before the start of the war and how they aligned even before the start of the war, they have no credibility with other big BRICS members. Yeah. So it's going to be very tough. Very
maybe tough. It's time for Pakistan to join BRICS.
Exactly, but this is an excellent point because Russia and China and now Iran, they are totally in favor. Try to sell this to the Indians. Absolutely impossible. For example, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was different because they entered at the same time. Russia and China said, look, guys, come in, and then if you have differences, you discuss your differences here on the table with all of us. This time is different. India is there already. They think that South Asia, they represent South Asia in BRICS. Pakistan now arriving with this new diplomatic clout that they have, trying to broker peace between the Americans and Iran, with a very good relationship with Iran, with an ultra excellent relationship with China. The Indians are going to look at that and say, wow, we're going to be like a little rat in this table. Nobody's going to pay attention to us. They're going to try to expel us from the table.
Yeah. Thank you, Pepe. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado a você também, Nima.
Eu espero que não destruir a sua tranquilidade lá.
Não, mas
aí.
Falar com você não destrói, melhora. Mas Hoje a gente devia estar indo para Nádia Ficarbala, Nima.
Sim,
Hoje era o dia
sim.
para a gente estar indo. Eu estou com Nádia Ficarbala na cabeça. Bom,
Sim.
e que espetáculo para todos vocês, nossa audiência. Se vocês ainda não viram em detalhes, entrem em canais
Fala
de
inglês. Fala
Telegram.
inglês.
Sorry, if you haven't seen it, go into Iranian Telegram channels or even Russian Telegram channels. Take a look at the images, and it's the most astonishing public spectacle that you can see in the 21st century. Nothing can beat that. It's a whole country paying homage and a tribute to their slain leader. And of course, this feeling of national pride. Even in the World Cup, they exited with pride. They were robbed by FIFA. They didn't lose a single match, and they left, on top, with the respect of the whole footballing nation around the world and the respect of the whole world, because everybody could see that they were being robbed. So they left the World Cup with dignity. Very, very important. The dignity that they're showing in the streets this week.